The mall was beginning to empty for the night, lights dimming slowly as shops pulled down their metal shutters and cleaning crews started their silent sweep across the gleaming floors. Among them walked an old man in a faded gray uniform, pushing a mop cart that creaked softly with every step. His name was Samuel, though most people just called him the janitor. He had worked in that same mall for over 30 years, through new owners, renovations, changing seasons, and fading memories. His hair was silver, his back slightly stooped, and his hands carried the weight of quiet years, but his eyes still watched everything. Unnoticed. Forgotten. Just part of the background. Samuel had no family left. His wife had passed 5 winters ago, and the children they had never came to be. His world had shrunk to a few routines: the morning coffee at the security desk, quiet nods to the shopkeepers, and the slow, methodical cleaning of floors no one thanked him for. Yet he kept coming back. Not because he needed the money, but because the silence of home was too loud to bear. The mall, for all its noise and movement, gave him something steady, predictable, safe. That night, as he mopped the western corridor near the empty food court, he heard something strange. Not the usual hum of the vending machines or the dull buzz of flickering lights, but a sound that didn't belong. A soft sob. At first, he thought it was a child throwing a tantrum, forgotten by a distracted parent. But as he followed the sound, each step more certain than the last, he realized it was coming from behind the carousel. The lights were off, and the ride was still, but tucked between the painted horses and the security gate was a small girl, no older than 6, curled up with her arms around her knees, shaking. Samuel knelt down slowly, careful not to startle her. His knees cracked softly as he lowered himself to her level, his voice rough with age but warm. The girl looked up, her face blotchy from crying, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He held out his hand, palm up, as if offering her the world. She hesitated, then placed her tiny hand in his, trusting a stranger without question. He didn't ask her name. Not yet. He simply wrapped his jacket around her shoulders and walked her to the staff lounge, where the heater hummed gently and the lights were softer. She didn't say much at first, only that her mother had gone into a store, and she had wandered off chasing a balloon. She couldn't remember which store. Couldn't remember how long she'd been lost. Samuel made her hot chocolate from the vending machine and gave her a pack of saltines from his drawer. He kept talking, not asking questions, just telling her stories about the mall, about the birds that flew through when someone left a door open, about the night he found a stray kitten in the fountain. Little by little, her fear began to melt. The security guards were already sweeping the building when Samuel radioed in. They hadn't even known a child was missing. The mall was almost shut. Announcements were made. Panic spread quickly. Minutes later, a woman came running, disheveled, breathless, wild-eyed. The girl saw her and jumped from the chair, arms outstretched. The woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing as she held her daughter. Samuel stood back quietly, hands in his pockets, letting the moment belong to them. But someone had recorded it. A teenager who had been watching from the corner filmed the moment when the girl reunited with her mother, and when the old janitor stood there quietly, unnoticed again, as if he were just part of the floor tiles. The video was uploaded that night, captioned simply, "This janitor saved a child." No one even said thank you. By morning, it had gone viral. Samuel didn't know. He didn't check social media. He was already back at work, cleaning the bathrooms on the 3rd floor when a local news crew showed up. They wanted to interview him. He declined, said it wasn't a big deal. He'd done what anyone would do. But people didn't let it go. They began asking his name, asking about his life. Within a day, strangers had left flowers, thank you notes, even toys with little cards saying for the janitor's hero girl. The mall held a small ceremony, awkward and rushed, giving him a gift card and a plaque he didn't know where to put. But the city had already fallen in love with the silent man who had quietly protected what mattered most. Stories surfaced from other mall employees, how he once found a lost dog in the parking garage and waited 4 hours for the owner. How he'd shoveled snow from the elderly clerk's car every winter without being asked. How he never missed a single shift in 30 years. Still, Samuel kept to his rhythm. He didn't speak much, didn't linger in the spotlight. But something inside him had changed. For the first time in decades, people looked at him, not past him. They saw him. The old man with the mop. The quiet guardian of 1,000 forgotten corners. And then, something happened that no one expected. The buzz hadn't faded. In fact, it had only grown louder. Within days, the story had traveled from phones to news channels, then to national talk shows. They spoke about kindness in an indifferent world, about unnoticed heroes, about how one small act had reminded the city of what humanity still looked like. Samuel's name appeared in headlines, the humble janitor who saved a child. His photo, snapped by someone at the scene, showed his lined face, soft eyes, and a modest smile that seemed untouched by attention. But he remained quiet. He refused most interviews, politely declined offers to appear on television. He still came to work on time, wore the same faded uniform, and pushed the same mop. For him, life hadn't changed. Not really. But for everyone else, it had. The mall, once a place of blind transaction and commercial blur, began to feel different. People smiled more. Shopkeepers kept an eye out. Security guards shared warm greetings. And at the center of it all was the old janitor, moving silently through his routines, still cleaning the floors with quiet precision. But underneath that calm, something had begun to stir in Samuel. It wasn't pride, and it wasn't discomfort. It was something deeper. A shift. Like he was awakening to something he'd long buried. A few weeks after the incident, Samuel found a small envelope taped to his locker. Inside was a handwritten note from the girl's mother. There were no grand words, just a simple, trembling thank you and a photo of the child, smiling in the sun, holding a teddy bear. On the back, one line, she still talks about the man who found her heart before anyone else did. Samuel sat down on the bench and held that note for a long time. Longer than he'd ever paused during a shift. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry, not from sadness, but from the strange, overwhelming feeling of being seen, truly seen, not as a janitor, but as a person who mattered. Word had reached the city's mayor, who insisted on presenting Samuel with a Medal of Civic Honor. He resisted, but his supervisor gently urged him to attend. The ceremony was held in the atrium of the mall, beneath the grand skylight, where Samuel had once swept up candy wrappers unnoticed. Now, dozens of people stood around him, shoppers, staff, media, even children from a nearby school holding handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Mr. Janitor." When the medal was pinned to his chest, applause echoed through the mall. Cameras flashed. But Samuel's eyes were on the little girl standing at the front row, her small hand waving at him with a smile that could melt any man's silence. That evening, when he returned to his small apartment on the edge of town, he placed the medal in a wooden drawer beside his wife's old photo and sat for a long time without speaking. The next morning, the mall was busier than usual, but something felt different. As Samuel began his usual sweep past the central fountain, he noticed something unusual. A young man stood nervously beside a kiosk, holding a notepad and a camera. He introduced himself as an independent filmmaker. He wanted to make a short film about Samuel's story, about unseen kindness, about the quiet souls who hold the world together without noise or recognition. Samuel was hesitant, but the man was gentle, respectful. He promised the story would remain true, quiet, honest, and real. No glamour, no exaggeration. They began shooting over the next few weeks. Samuel rarely spoke on camera, but the filmmaker captured him in his element. Cleaning silently, helping customers who dropped things, returning lost items to the information desk. The film wasn't about what he had done once, but about who he was every single day. When the project was complete, the short film was shared online under the title, "The Man the City Almost Forgot." It went viral, not for drama, not for entertainment, but for truth. Messages poured in. A letter came from a young man who said he used to walk past janitors like they were invisible. Now he stopped to thank them. Another from a single mother who said Samuel reminded her that goodness still existed. Donations started arriving. People wanted to give back. One local college offered Samuel a full scholarship for any child or grandchild he had. When they found out he had none, they asked if they could create a fund in his name for underprivileged youth pursuing education. This Samuel Fund was born, and through it, lives began to change. At first, Samuel struggled to understand it. He had only helped a child, only done what he hoped someone else would have done for his wife, had she ever been in danger. But the world doesn't run on grand gestures alone, it runs on quiet ones. Ones that ripple outward. Ones that remind people of the warmth they'd forgotten. Then, something even more unexpected happened. A woman approached him near the escalators one evening. She looked to be in her 40s, dressed professionally, but her voice trembled. She told him that years ago, when she was a child, she had gotten lost in the same mall. She never forgot the janitor who found her crying near the food court and waited with her until her parents came. She was sure it was him. Samuel's eyes searched her face for a moment, And then he remembered the small girl with the pink sneakers, the trembling hands, the father who thanked him once and never looked back. "You saved me once," she whispered, eyes brimming. "And now you've saved another. I never got to say thank you. So, thank you." She hugged him, tightly, like someone embracing a memory. That night, Samuel walked home through the darkened city, the sidewalks glistening with rain. He looked at the world a little differently. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. But maybe, just maybe, it had been listening all along. Winter returned with a slow breath, dusting the edges of the city with frost and painting the mall's glass exterior in sheets of ice that sparkled beneath the morning sun. The festive season was approaching, and with it came crowds, music, and a familiar wave of hurried footsteps. But something had changed in how the mall moved. The pace was still quick, the energy buzzing, but now, amid the clatter of shopping bags and holiday jingles, people paused. They looked each other in the eye. They smiled at the staff. They noticed the ones who had long gone unnoticed. At the center of it all, Samuel moved through the corridors just as he always had, mop in hand, radio clipped to his belt, quiet but ever-present. Yet the way people looked at him now carried something different: respect, warmth, recognition. They didn't just see a janitor anymore. They saw a man who reminded them what kindness looked like. The Samuel Fund had grown beyond anything he imagined. What started as a few kind donations was now supporting dozens of young students, children who had once fallen through the cracks of the system, much like the girl he found near the carousel. Letters arrived every week, handwritten thank yous from students across the city, stories of how they'd bought their first school books, how they'd paid for classes, how they no longer felt invisible. Samuel read each one, carefully, quietly. He kept them all in a wooden box beside his bed, tied with a ribbon his wife had once used for Christmas gifts. The box grew heavier with every passing week, but his heart somehow lighter. One cold December morning, as snow began to drift through the skylights and pile softly against the mall's revolving doors, Samuel arrived early. He always did. But this time, the air felt charged with something unfamiliar. A woman from the administration met him at the door, her smile nervous but bright. She asked him to follow her. He hesitated but complied, his mop left behind for the first time in decades. They led him to the atrium, the same spot where the medal had been pinned to his chest months ago. But today, it looked different. Hundreds of faces greeted him. Store employees, customers, students, even children from local schools. At the center stood a plaque, draped in cloth. As the cloth was pulled away, a hush fell over the crowd. Etched into the marble was his name, Samuel Ellis. Beneath it, the words, "For the quiet strength that reminded us all how to listen, how to care, and how to notice the forgotten." The plaque was permanent, fixed into the floor of the mall he had walked for 30 years. He was part of its foundation now. Literally. He didn't know what to say. So he did what he always did. He nodded gently, pressed his hand to his chest, and offered the crowd a grateful, humble smile. And that was enough. Later that evening, after the crowd had thinned and the mall had returned to its usual hum, Samuel sat alone near the now-lit carousel. The lights blinked softly in rhythm, and children's laughter echoed from the food court. He was about to rise when a small hand tugged at his sleeve. He turned and saw her, the little girl. The same one he had found crying months ago, now bundled in a red coat and woolen hat. She didn't say anything, just climbed onto the bench beside him and sat quietly. Her mother stood nearby, watching with tears in her eyes. The girl held out a candy cane wrapped in shiny foil. Samuel took it with a smile. "For Christmas," she whispered. He didn't know it, but someone captured the moment again, a photo this time. A quiet shot of a man and a child sitting beneath carousel lights, sharing the silence, sharing the peace. The photo spread across the internet like wildfire. Not for drama, not for outrage, but for something the world had been hungry for: gentleness. Weeks passed, then months. Samuel still cleaned the mall, but now he also spoke at schools. Small talks, nothing formal. Just stories of moments, of kindness, of paying attention. He never claimed to be wise. He just told them what he knew, that being present could change a life. That noticing someone, really noticing them, could be more powerful than any act of fame or fortune. The mall eventually offered him retirement, with full honors and a lifelong pension. He accepted it quietly. On his last day, the staff gave him a key. A symbolic one, crafted in brass, engraved with his name. "To the one who held us together," it said. He slipped it into his pocket and walked the halls one last time, touching the railing near the escalator, the corners he once swept, the staff lounge where he made tea every morning. Outside, the city moved like always. Fast, loud, alive. But now, in its heart, lived a story of an old janitor, a lost child, and a moment that reminded everyone what it meant to care. And that story would live far longer than any video or article. It lived in how people treated each other, in how they looked up, and how they noticed the quiet ones among them. Samuel stood beneath the snowflakes drifting from the sky, his old coat buttoned to the collar. He looked once more at the mall before turning away, his step slow but sure. Behind him, in that building of glass and marble, a plaque bore his name. A fund carried his legacy. And in the eyes of thousands, the man who once walked unseen had become unforgettable, not through noise, but through silence. Not through fame, but through presence. And the city, forever changed, would never look past someone like him again.